Greetings, fellow Gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru.
And you're going to tell me about Fantasy Island.
Yes, welcome to my rant on Blumhouse's Fantasy Island, which Jack has not seen, but I unfortunately have seen. Needless to say, the movie was not good and was a huge missed opportunity, so I'm going to explain why to him as much as to you. So first off, let me talk about the things I liked about the movie, which is pretty much everything that's in the trailer. Everything that kind of sets up this movie. Everything that sets up this movie as being about, like, a horror version of Fantasy Island in which people are brought to the island, and in kind of like an anthology format, each of them goes through a scenario in which they either realize the fantasy is not for them, or the fantasy is not all it's cracked up to be, or have to go through some sort of internal journey before they can even enjoy the fantasy.
Okay, so what I'm getting is that this is not so much an episode of Fantasy Island so much as Daffy Duck's Fantastic Island.
Fair enough, yes.
The horror movie. Now, which right out of the gate when I saw that trailer, I was like, no, this could be a terrible idea.
So that first half that was about that, I was okay with. And I was also okay with the idea that it's just an evil fucking island and it is messing with everyone. So you get your fantasy, but with a dark twist. I was okay with all that.
Lost this shit.
Yeah.
You know?
I was okay with all of that. In fact, I was engaged with it for about half of this movie. I was sitting there going like, actually, this movie's pretty fucking good. But then the second half kicks in and we get to like the first of like 3 twists, and that's when my brain starts to go, oh no, this is not going to be the movie I wanted it to be, is it? Okay, well, let's see if I enjoy the movie it is. Spoilers, I didn't.
I mean, not even the guy from Ant-Man could fucking
the thing is,
sell this movie for me.
Michael Pena plays Mr. Rourke, who is a character carried over from the original Fantasy Island show, who was originally played by Ricardo Montalban.
Yep.
And Michael Pena is one of the best parts of this movie. Unfortunately, he feels completely wasted given what this movie actually is. Like, he's only there so that they can call this Fantasy Island. You know, like... And that's another thing I really hated about this movie is that every single thing it does to try to connect to the original Fantasy Island feels either incredibly forced or pointless. Either way, you're sitting there going like, why didn't you just make this an evil island movie where dreams come true but with a twist? Why did you just make it like Blumhouse's Fantastical Island or something? Like, why did you...
Yeah. Why did it have to be Fantasy Island trademark?
And they do a couple twists later on in the movie where you revealed that some characters are actually characters from the original show, and that shit's just dumb when that happens.
Well, how are you going to hide Hervé Villachez?
Well, they found a way.
Oh, you're shitting me. It's not like there's a midget and you're like, well, okay, we got that.
No. It's one of those cases where like the character was there the whole time and you just didn't know because dumb.
Oh, so it's not even like an Emperor Palpatine where he like turns into a midget or something?
No, that might have been something. And that especially might have been something if you had gone with what I thought this movie was originally going to be, but we'll get to that in a second. So there's that. There's also the fact that by the time you get to the second half of the movie starts being really inconsistent with the actual rules of the island. So everything you were told at the beginning of the movie, so you're expecting the movie to follow those rules, the movie just starts breaking those rules. And so then you just start getting annoyed going like, okay, well, if the island can do that, why are you doing this? And you're just left confused. And while you're trying to figure that out, it's dumping all this exposition and twists on you that are just compiling the dumb.
Well, if I remember, like, the original show, there really is, like, only one formula for the damn thing, which is someone comes to the island, they have, like, a dream or a wish that they want fulfilled. The island fulfills it, but it also demonstrates why it ain't all it's cracked up to be.
Exactly. And that's... If it had stuck to that, this would have been great. In fact, I don't think this should have been a movie in the first place. I think Blumhouse should have just turned this into a TV show and had it be an anthology where each one's a new story like the original show. And
yeah, I think that probably would have worked.
But just giving it like more of a dark horror twist, and that would have been fine.
Yeah, I think I would have been a little bit more up for like a 6-episode season than like a 2-hour movie for some strange reason.
But because they decided to turn it into a 2-hour movie, which it is 2 hours, and the movie feels really long in that regard. Because they decided to turn it into a 2-hour movie, that means all the fantasy stories have to at some point connect to one another and lead to an overarching villain plot, which just completely destroys the entire point of the island. Like, it's just...
Okay, so, like, Ricardo Montalban's like a bad guy in this one?
I'll get to the spoilers in a second and talk about that.
Okay.
You'll see.
All right.
You'll see, because I'm going to spoil this for him as much as for you in a minute. But first, I want to get to the pre-spoilers first. Not that you should see this movie, just... whatever. Okay, so
doing due diligence.
It has to. It's instead of like doing the Fantasy Island thing, it had to have an overarching villain plot that is convoluted and fucking dumb and breaks the rules of the island that they set up at the beginning of the movie. So it's extra annoying. Ooh. But of course, with that little caveat that those rules you learned at the beginning of the movie were actually part of the lie the person was telling you, and you're just like, fuck you, movie, like just.
Oh,
fuck you.
That's not good.
And it's not like satisfying like when Freddy shows up at the end of Nightmare on Elm Street, even though like the rules established that he should have been defeated. It's not satisfying like that where it happens. You're like, oh shit, the rules are wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's like a twist setting up another movie. This is more like, no, in like the last half, we're just going to throw all the rules away. Like, just fuck the rules. I'm like, okay, well then, what was the point of any of this? Okay. All right. Also, the individual journeys that were established at the beginning of the movie, you have a character who wants to get back at the bully that bullied them when they were a kid, but then kind of discovers very quickly, and I'm not really spoiling anything, this is all in the trailer for the movie, that like hurting someone like that is not within her abilities. You know, that's right. When someone's actually sitting there crying in front of you, you can't do it. It's like, okay, fine, that's a nice little journey. This soldier who well, not soldier, but the guy who wish he enlisted as a soldier instead of enlisting as a cop because he didn't see action as a cop. So he kind of wants the glory of a soldier, but kind of getting thrown into a soldier-like situation and learning that the glory is not all it's cracked up to be. You know, that's a nice little journey. The journey of the two brothers that want it all, but then discover that wanting it all also comes with this caveat that if you have it all, people want it all. So they'll be coming for you to get it. You know, like all that is great, but then you get to the second half of the movie where some of those journeys are just thrown away. Like those, in order to give you an overarching villain plot, they had to throw away all the personal journeys of the characters that got there, with a couple exceptions. Some of them are fulfilled, but others of them are like, okay, so that character essentially learned nothing from this fantasy. Like,
so wait, why did it need an overarching villain plot?
That was my question when I was watching it. I'm like, why? You could have done two things that would have made this very simple. You could have easily had made it like, okay, evil fucking island. There you go. Done. Right.
Or we could have just done it pure anthology.
Yeah, or you could have just done it pure, like, the island's not evil, but it will teach you something.
Yeah, like, okay, so is this like an origin story or something?
Yeah. At the end, you kind of find out it's an origin story for the actual show proper, but it doesn't work as one, so that's great. So, needless to say, I do not recommend watching this movie, but if you still insist on seeing this movie, but you want a little bit more information, we're about to go into the spoilers, so, strap in.
Okay, so this isn't like a remake, it's like a prequel?
Yeah, it sets itself up as a prequel.
Okay.
And I'll go into how that happens. In the movie, there's the two brothers that I mentioned earlier that want it all. One of the brothers, it's technically not his fantasy they're going into. They're going into his other brother's fantasy, and his other brother brought him along to enjoy the everything.
Right.
But they're dealing with their own little personal journey in which the brothers have been rooming together for a long time because one of the brothers got kicked out of the family home because he was gay. So the brother's basically been taking care of his little brother this entire time, his little step brother, technically, because one's Asian, one's not. They're from different mothers, or was it fathers? I don't know, one of the two. So at the end of the movie, one of the brothers ends up dead during this story, and the other brother, the Asian one, the gay one, decides that his fantasy, because he hasn't had a fantasy yet, is to see his brother get off the island and live a happy life. But in exchange for that, which again, I don't know why this is, because throughout the movie, none of these fantasies require an exchange, but okay. In exchange for that to happen, he has to stay on the island.
Okay, was it supposed to be one of those, like, well, we can make it real, but there's a cost?
Yeah, that's the idea.
But then again, if that was the case, then why'd the other brother die?
Yeah. So he gets that exchange, and so he stays off the island. And throughout the entire movie, we've been joking about the fact that in college he had the nickname T for some reason, but he hated that nickname. And you're like, why does he have the nickname T?
Wait.
Yeah. You know where this is going. Oh my God.
Oh my, no.
I know.
No.
I know.
No. Are you fucking kidding me?
And so he gets to the end, and Michael Pena as Mr. Rourke is all like, so what do I call you? And he's just like, well, in college, I had this nickname, and he removes his shirt and reveals this tattoo of the word tattoo.
What?
And that's when you reveal that Asian dude has been tattooed the whole time.
All right, so at some point, Asian dude becomes Hervé Villachez.
And here's what I fucking hate about this whole twist is that it doesn't make sense.
No.
Because over the course of this movie, they establish that the island can create people out of thin air. So it could just bring people back to life, but they're not real. They're fictional creations of the island made up of like the black water that's in the island's ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. But they're turned into it.
Okay.
And if those things get off the island, they just turn into a black mess.
Right. They can't leave.
Yeah, because the magic's like secluded to the island. So this whole dream of his dead brother getting on the plane and flying off, if the movie hadn't cut right there, the brother would have just turned into black mush the moment it flew off the island. It's one of those, this is only a happy story because you ended it right there.
Yeah, well, at that point, like, wouldn't Tattoo just be like, oh, well, fuck this?
So at that point, you're staying on the island for no reason. For your own peace of mind that the brother gets away, which the movie argues against the whole peace of mind thing because it's not real. So
Okay, so it's not gonna be. So it's that they didn't even come up with the like. Oh, turns out the other brother was dead the whole time. This was all Tattoo Guy's fucking fantasy. In order to keep his brother around, he stays on the island or something like that.
Nope.
I mean, that still would have been dumb, but at least would have made sense.
Here's the thing. It would make sense if his brother was staying alive on the island, but his dream specifically was his brother to go off and live a life. But he's not gonna, because the moment that thing leaves the island, it's not gonna be there anymore. So this is only his own brain deluding itself into believing it goes off. And so I'm like, this is being presented as a happy ending.
Dumb. That's terrible.
And that's the moment when you realize, when he reveals that he's Tattoo, that this is technically a prequel.
Oh, so this is like the reveal at the end of the movie?
Yeah. Oh. This is a prequel setting up the original show. Now, who knows? Maybe Blumhouse will turn this into their own show. I don't know. But here's the thing.
We're not off to a great start, sounds like.
But here's the thing. That is not the worst part of the movie, though it's definitely bad.
What?
Okay. So in this movie, you have like 4 or 5 stories happening at once. I've described a couple of them. You have that guy who wants to be a soldier. You have the brothers. You have the girl who wants to get back at her bullies. There's also a story in which Maggie Q's character wants to go back on the biggest regret on her life. And at the point at the beginning of the movie, she believes that regret was not saying yes to the boy who proposed to her like 10 years ago.
Okay.
So the fantasy is created in which she gets to say yes to him, she gets to live a happy life with him, and she gets to see what that life is like with him, with a kid and all that stuff, and living the happy family life. But it's not enough for her because she realizes that what she truly regrets is not that. What she truly regrets is something that comes out of fucking nowhere, is that she didn't save someone in a fucking apartment fire that she caused like a year before this.
Okay.
So she goes back to Michael Pena, who establishes at the beginning of the movie that there is only one fantasy granted per person.
Okay.
So she finds some weird loophole where it's like, well, technically my fantasy was going back on my biggest regret, and that wasn't my biggest regret. So you owe me another fantasy that goes back on my biggest regret, or you're not actually giving me my fantasy.
Okay, but is there some sort of devil's bargain kind of thing going on here?
That's what I was wondering. But apparently not. So she goes and gets her second fantasy, even though the movie establishes you only get one because of a stupid loophole that makes no goddamn sense. But okay, whatever. It's one of those dumb linguistic, like, genie things.
Yeah.
Whatever. The movie wasn't operating on dumb linguistic genie things up until that point, but now it is, I guess. But here's the thing that annoys me. In another person's fantasy, you have the cop who wanted to be a soldier. And in that fantasy, the island recognizes what he really wants. So it doesn't just give him as a soldier, which is the base fantasy. Right. It gives him this extra step where it's not just him as a soldier, it's him as a soldier in the platoon during the mission in which his father died.
Okay, so you're telling me that this one story is like an actual episode of Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, the island was able to recognize what his actual want was, not becoming a soldier, but to save his father's life, essentially. That's his actual fantasy. But so it recognized the fake fantasy, but gave him the real fantasy. Why didn't it do that for Maggie Q from the get-go?
Yeah, that seems like a thing that should have happened.
Why could the island not recognize that? Because it could recognize his.
I gotta ask, do they go into the origin of, like, Ricardo Montalban's character?
Yes, they do, actually. Because the origin given in this movie is that he is on the island initially to bring his dead wife back, who died of a disease. I'm assuming it's supposed to be some sort of cancer.
And she died of plot convenience.
Yeah, so he comes to the island to bring her back to life. But the problem is that she comes back to life still with the cancer, so she dies eventually, and then the island can bring her back. And the island will only keep bringing her back because of a devil's bargain he made with the island, where he is now forced to grant other people's fantasies. So he has to bring people to the island to grant the island's fantasies, and he can keep having his wife, but she's going to keep dying of cancer.
Okay, well that's at least something.
But here's the thing about that. That establishes that, okay, this is an evil island story, right?
Yeah. The island's kind of a motherfucker.
At that point, you're thinking, like, okay, it's an evil island. It's granting people's wishes, but it's taking their souls. And then, like, leading you to believe that might be the case is that when Maggie Q does her second fantasy and she goes into the apartment complex on fire, she realizes that everyone that's on the island with her, having their fantasies filled out, are all in that fantasy.
Yeah.
But it's like a fake version of them. And so she's like, oh shit, there's the cop. He's standing there. He's not doing anything. There's the two brothers. They were in the apartment complex too, and they're running down the stairs. Oh shit. What's going on? So me as the viewer, I'm going like, oh shit. Is it like when it fulfills your fantasies, it takes your soul and you just become a player on the island?
Yeah.
That's what's happening?
Oh, okay.
And I was like, okay, I can roll with that. This is a horror fantasy island after all. Okay, I can roll with that. No. It's stupider than that. So it turns out that all these people on the island at that period of time were all connected to one singular event. They were all involved in this apartment fire. Maggie Q started the fire by leaving her tea kettle on and not checking it fast enough, so the fire caught on and it made the entire apartment complex go to blaze. The cop guy arrived at the scene but was too chicken shit to run into the fire to save anyone. The two brothers were living in that apartment complex and left their apartment without saving their roommate, who was trapped in the house. It was trapped in one of the rooms because all the bookshelves and stuff fell in front of the door and whatever. So he couldn't get out, and the two brothers left the apartment without helping him.
Okay.
And this is when we basically find out. And so you're sitting there, okay, and now you're sitting there and you're going like, okay, well, what about the girl with the bully? Here's where the movie gets really fucking stupid. So we find out that the girl who wanted to get back on the bully, she is the girlfriend of the guy who died in that apartment fire. And that the entire movie, everything that's happened in this movie so far, all these people coming to the island and having these dark fucking fantasies fulfilled, is all part of her fantasy that she gets back on the people that caused her boyfriend to die.
Okay, but then what was the whole thing about the revenge?
Apparently she just wanted to throw in revenge towards her bully. But the thing is, in order to get that revenge on the bully, she had to go through this whole emotional arc in which she, without anyone watching, has to go through the like, oh no, I'm not going to hurt her. I'm not going to do this. Oh no, I have to forgive my bully and do all that. And she's doing this in many instances when no one else is around. So this requires her as a character to be acting for us, the audience, not anyone in the scenes. So it's completely fucking fucked and fudged.
So the only reason this twist works at all is because it's a movie.
Yes. Ooh. Because you're watching her, and then they try to pull some fudging. It's just like, oh, well, I did that in that scene because I was recording myself for my vlog, and you're just like, that's
why would
stupid.
you be recording yourself for a vlog on Fantasy Island?
I don't know. I'm not even sure why the island didn't have no camera rule.
Yeah, no shit. You know, like, is the idea that it wants? Does it have an Instagram account? You know, like, is that it? Is this like Fire Festival Fantasy Island? What the fuck's going on?
And so then, like the characters like go to like Michael Pena and are just like, oh my god, she's gonna kill us all or whatever. And he's like, well, I have to fulfill her fantasy because if I don't, my wife's gonna disappear. So he eventually has to give up his wife so that he cannot fulfill her fantasy, so that they can defeat her.
Wait, whoa, wait. Slow down. Wait. So, but if he does that, then how is this a prequel to the original Fantasy Island?
Don't fucking ask me. He decides.
Wouldn't you just fucking leave at that point?
Yeah, he decides to stay on the island after that. Don't fucking ask me. Like, they leave so many questions, and just like every.
Oh God,
And then for whatever reason, it turns out that the bully that was brought to the island, and this brings up a whole new host of questions. So for most of these people's fantasies, in fact, all of their fantasies, it creates people from thin air using the black goo on the island that turns into people.
Right.
So for Maggie Q, it creates a younger version of her ex-boyfriend to show up, and so they can recreate the point where he asked her out. For fucking cop guy, his father and his platoon show up as fake little people that show up right by the island. For the brothers that want it all, a whole bunch of fake hookers and strippers appear at this big house in which they're living in with all the money and cocaine.
Right.
So the island, for people's fantasies, explicitly creates fake people for them because they're fantasies. They're not real.
Yeah.
Then why the fuck, for the villain's plot, did they kidnap her bully to bring to the island and also convince all these other people to come to the island? Why did it need real people in that instance when it could have just created fake versions of them? Unless that, you should think, if the twist at the end was that none of them were fucking real and that it was whatever, then I would just be like, this is still dumb, but okay movie.
Okay, oh yeah, there would have been like some sort of internal consistency.
But it didn't do that, and then so you're sitting there going like, why does this person have people flown to the island for her fantasy instead of just creating them like it did for everyone else's fantasy? Like,
I have no idea.
On top of that, the bully, because she never got her fantasy, decides that her fantasy is for essentially the evil villain girl to be defeated. And she gets that fantasy without any caveats. And I'm like, well, why did everyone else's fantasy come with a caveat? Was it because it was the first girl's fantasy for them all to have bad fantasies? Is that the only reason this was a horror story? Like, it's like trying to have its cake and eat it too, where it wants it to both be a prequel to the original show while also being the horror version.
All right.
It's so bad. It's so dumb. And it sucks because for about 50% of the movie, I would even be generous and say 75% of the movie, I was on board, but that last 25%, it just completely collapses in on itself. And the 25% before that, it's starting to show its seams.
Ooh. Ooh.
And there are like twists that happen before that are like the fake twists. Like you have the initial one where you're like, oh, Ricardo Montalban might be evil. Okay.
Okay, that makes sense that you do that.
Okay, like he's doing it to give them up to the island or something. Okay. Well, that turns out to be wrong. And then the next twist is like, oh, it's actually his wife that's evil. And you're like, okay. Is she like the spirit of the island or something? No. All right. That doesn't make sense. And then you get to the third twist and you're like, okay, this twist makes more sense, but it still doesn't make sense. Now, granted, I'll give them this. They do hint towards this final twist at the beginning of the movie, because throughout everyone's fantasies, they keep having these weird visions of like this person who looks like they're completely burnt to a crisp. And I assumed when that was happening that was like the spirit of the island or something. You know?
Right.
Like, it was like the dark shadow of the island that was watching them as their fantasy.
Yeah, it's like it's Pele or something.
You know, but it turns out, no, it's the boyfriend that got burnt up in the apartment fire that we don't reveal happened until, like, the last third of the movie. And they also had the girl who comes to the island for the bully. At the beginning of the movie, she's looking at a phone picture of her and what you assume is her boyfriend, who you assume died because she's looking at it very forlornly.
Okay, yeah.
Or they had some sort of breakup or something, and so she's on the island. So there are those little hints early on in the movie, but it doesn't culminate in something that overall makes sense, because you still had to have this character act out her own personal journeys when people weren't even there to witness it.
For no reason.
For no reason. Only to go back on that. And that's not even getting into the little things that kind of are really bad. Like, there's like an entire really forced, like, God
damn it, I'm listening to this and I'm finding myself going, God damn it, I can almost see how this whole train wreck happened.
Yeah.
Because you're like, all right, so someone's like, all right, so here's our Fantasy Island movie. We got it. Here we go. And someone's like, oh, hey, well, why don't we give it a twist? And they're like, well, you can't do that. You can't make this person. We already set up that's one fantasy per person, so we can't do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, but what if they didn't really get their fantasy? I guess.
Well, isn't the island supposed to remember?
Yeah, isn't the island supposed to fucking know? Isn't that part of the point?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, we'll say that they found some way to cheat the system. We already shot it. You know, no, do this. And you're just like everything,
like studio meddling or something.
Yeah, everything you're telling me that the movie does badly sounds like it's covering up for a previous mistake.
Yeah, like during rewrites, they just kept compounding the problem.
Yeah, whereas it should have just been. It should have just all been a build up to the reveal of why Ricardo Montalban and Tattoo were fucking there.
Yeah,
you know, because that would have been like, well, look, I'm here because I am not willing to give up my wife, and the island gives it to me every time I get someone to come to the island. So I'm just always here.
Yeah.
That would have been like, oh, okay, well all right. So there is some sort of, like, the island likes him. Got it.
Yeah,
He's special.
Like, what you could have done, like, something that I was thinking about this, like in the past few days since I saw the movie, where I'm like, actually, a cool twist you could have done with the Tattoo character is if you have it be revealed at the end that his brother has always been dead.
Yeah, that's where I thought it was going.
And that his fantasy was that he and his brother get to live out this really cool life, and so he gets to give his brother everything in exchange for the fact that his brother was there for him when he was kicked out from his home because he was gay.
Yeah. Basically, he never gets to pay his brother back for the kindness that he gave him.
So like, at the end, like, his brother's been dead the whole time, and so he has to stay on the island if he keeps wanting to live that fantasy, the same way that Michael Pena has to live on the island.
Yeah. Like, that would have been a nice.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, when you were describing that, that's what I was thinking it probably should have been, which would have been like, oh, it wasn't the brother's fantasy. The brother was a fantasy person. It was T's fantasy, and now he's either out of gratitude, or, you know, some sort of weird thing the island's doing, he decides to stay because that would make sense.
That would have been cool. That would have been a twist I could get behind. It would also fit thematically with some of the other stuff happening on the island, because obviously for Maggie Q's fantasy, if she wants to have that happy family, she has to stay on the island. So
yeah, exactly.
But then, like, at the 11th hour, let's switch it to this other thing. Like, okay, fine, whatever. Guy dies in apartment fire. But then even in some of the fantasies that I enjoyed watching at the beginning of the movie, there were some weird, like, moments that felt a little forced. Like, there's a point in which the cop who gets to meet his dad as a soldier on the mission in which his dad dies. And you're like, okay, so the natural progression of this is that he is going to try to do everything to make sure his dad doesn't die at the end of this mission. That's what this story is going to be about. Because his fantasy is his dad living. That's the real thing. And then, of course, by the end of the movie, has to learn to let his dad go. Right? That's right. Yeah, that seems reasonable. That seems like that's the real thing. So what ends up happening is that he tells his dad everything. His dad doesn't believe him, but over the course of the story, he starts to believe him more. And so once the dad believes that he is his son and that he is from the future and that that he is going to die at the end of this mission, the dad decides to fucking leave. Like, we're going to go. We're going to get out of this fucking mission. And so the son pulls a gun on him and is like, no, you are going to complete this mission. You are not going to abandon these soldiers because you are a hero and heroes don't do that. And I'm sitting there going like, shouldn't this be the other way around in which the son is trying to get him to leave, but the dad's determined to stay on the mission because that's the right thing to do? Like yeah. This feels like you flipped it and it makes no sense flipped around. Because now, like, what is his fantasy? It's not to save his dad, but to be with his dad when he dies. Like, what's the actual fantasy?
Yeah. What's the outcome here? You know, it feels like it. Yeah, it sounds really dumb.
And then when the dad actually does die, it dies because the fantasies all collide, and so he's being attacked by the fucking cocaine dealers who attacked the brothers.
What?
And then he dies in like a blaze of glory, and. But then that plot doesn't even matter because later on, the cop who wanted to be a soldier ends up jumping on a grenade like his dad did. So I guess that's the end of his journey. And I was just like, what were you trying to say with this story? The natural progression of the story was one thing, but then you decided to make it different, and I don't think it worked.
No, that really...
And part of why it didn't work is that you decided to tie it into all the other stories and have them collide like you did. And the other reason why it didn't work is that at the very beginning, like, okay, so wait, hold on. What was the whole point of him having his father here and going on the last mission with his father and that he doesn't want his father to die if he's going to force his father to carry out the mission before he's actually gone through any journey?
Some really bad storytelling, man.
It's really bad, especially since you don't even find out later until way later that he was a coward and didn't run into the building. So his whole thing's actually that he's a coward, and you're like, okay, well, that would have been nice to know going into his journey, or at least have that play out in his journey and not someone else's story.
Yeah.
So Fantasy Island is bad. I wanted to like it. In fact, for a huge chunk of the running time, I was enjoying it. But when it falls apart hard. And it just leaves a terrible fucking taste in your mouth. And then you look back on the stuff that you did like, and you start to see the seams with it, especially since they're not actually completed half the time.
This is... I'm starting to feel bad.
Because here's the thing. Like, there's a way you could have thematically have all tied it together. It's like, okay, so if you had Maggie Q's story be that she has to give up this fantasy with this family on this island or whatever, because it's not real and she's not going to be able to fulfill that. Okay, she has to give that up. Okay, Ricardo Montalban has to give up his wife. Okay, brother, if you made it so that the brother was dead the whole time... have the point at the end where he has to eventually let go of his brother. You know, if you have the dad, eventually he has to let go of his dad. You know, it's like... Right. You could have thematically made these all relevant so that they make sense in a movie together, but instead you had to tie it in to a generic villain plot about revenge over, by the way, a boyfriend which she only went on one date with and has decided to plan out this huge James Bondian villain plan.
Wait a minute. What?
Yeah, she only went on one date with the guy, and then he died in a fire.
How do we know this?
Because she explains it, and then there's this one. It's probably the funniest line in the whole movie, where the tattoo character goes like, "All this over one date?"
Yeah. Damn. Like that sounds really bad.
And also, you have the bully who's like kind of learning through this thing that like, oh shit, like I was really mean to this girl when she was younger, and it really fucked her up and stuff. That's really bad. But then, by the very nature of the story, at the very end, she just basically has to be like, no, fuck this girl. She deserved it because she turns out to be the villain of the story.
Oh my god!
It's such a mess of a movie. Like it doesn't work together thematically. It doesn't work together structurally. It's breaking its rules left and right. And you by the end of the movie, you sit there and going like, so I just sat through this entire movie for the whole thing to culminate in it revealing that it's a prequel to a show that it's clearly not a prequel to. Okay.
Do they say the plane?
That happens at one point. There is someone who says the plane. They don't say it that way. The plane. But there is a point. Oh, shit! That reminds me. There's a whole character in this movie that I have no idea why or how they exist given what happens at the end of this movie. And that's the fact that Michael Rooker's in this movie. Now,
wait, what?
Michael Rooker is established at the very beginning of this movie as this weird resistance fighter against the island. That he came to this island when he was like a few years ago to see his daughter. But then something went wrong and his daughter turned into a flesh-eating zombie. So he had to put his daughter down.
Okay.
Now, this is a nod, obviously, to fucking The Walking Dead, because it's Michael Rooker.
It's Michael Rooker. Got
but
it.
more than that, he tries to help the characters get off the island and escape, because the island's not what you think it is. It's an evil island. And you're like, okay. And that's when you initially are like, okay, evil island. And so Michael Rooker at one point sacrifices himself to save the two girls, the one that's the bully and the one that wants revenge on the bully, who turns out to be the main villain of the story.
Right.
And then he's forgotten about for the rest of the movie. And by the end of the movie, you're sitting there going like, wait, so if the island wasn't actually evil, why did that character exist? Was that just created to continue the main girl's fantasy? Was he not real? What with the Michael Rooker plot? What was that?
So Michael Rooker just, like in the original season of The Walking Dead, Michael Rooker appears and then fucks off. And we don't see him for a couple of seasons.
Was he only there to give a red herring? Was that the entire purpose of him? Like I still don't know if he was supposed to be a creation of the island or if he was actually supposed to be there to warn them about the evils of the island. But if the island isn't evil, then...
Look, in this Cabin Fever movie, we need an evil stove.
Like, maybe the internal logic is in the movie he's obviously gone stir crazy on the island because he's constantly talking to himself and shit, so maybe he's supposed to be, like, schizophrenic. But, like...
Okay.
But, like, you never actually give an on-screen interpretation, so am I just supposed to guess? It feels weird for a movie that kind of over-explains everything to leave that as this weird hanging thing.
Oh, yeah, this sounds like it's real bad.
Yeah, it's a hot mess. I do not recommend seeing Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. If The Lodge is playing somewhere near you, I've heard good things about that. Go see that instead. I'm going to be seeing that this Thursday. By all accounts, it's a way better movie than this.
Just watch look. Fuck the devil you know, in this case. Just take a chance.
Take a chance. I've heard really good things about The Lodge. I do not recommend this movie.
Oh my god.
There's also a complete chance that we're going to be back sitting in this seat next week because the Brahms The Boy 2 comes out next weekend. And I don't know if I'm going to see it, but if I do, and it's as bad as I fear it's going to be, I'm going to be ranting to him again.
But the first one was already pretty bad.
First one was already pretty bad. I think I did a vlog on it a while back, and I think I was nicer to it than I should have been back then. But I also remember that vlog not being positive.
No, yeah. I remember it being like, it was at best it was like, eh.
But the other thing is that the sequel, which at first I thought was a prequel, but according to people, it's a sequel, not a prequel. Okay. Apparently goes back on everything that they revealed in the first movie, so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So, where can they find you, Count Jackula?
You can find me on twitch.tv. I stream every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and again at Sunday, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we talk about all sorts of things. And you might want to just give me a follow there because I randomly stream during the week. Of course, Thursday and Sunday are the big shows, so we definitely want to see you there. You can also follow me on Twitter, Count_Jackula, and you can follow me on Instagram, Satanic Jackula.
Absolutely. And y'all know me, I'm the Horror Guru. You can find me at the Horror Guru on Twitter, on Twitch, on Facebook. Just look up the Horror Guru and Blood Splattered Cinema and I'll be there. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to ring that notification bell so that you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you want to help this channel more directly, then be sure to check out my Patreon page. And remember, if you decide to go the Patreon route, even $1 a month can go a long way. And with that all said, my fellow Gorehounds, I'm going to go wash the taste of this godforsaken movie out of my mouth and probably go watch something good like Lock and Key or something. So, peace out, and I'll catch y'all later.
De pain.
Oh, it's true.
Hervé Villachez is rolling around in his tiny grave.
Yep.